Transgender ban. President Trump announces a rule change for the military. We're at the White House with a report. Healthcare vote. Senators oppose a bill to repeal Obamacare and defund Planned Parenthood. Opioid epidemic. We talked to former drug czar Bill Bennett about what's being called the worst drug crisis in American history. And remembering a martyr. Crowds gather on the one-year anniversary of Father Hamel's death at the hands of terrorists. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, July 26, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Donald Trump bars transgender people from serving in the military in any capacity. He cites medical costs and disruption. This morning, the Pentagon seemed unaware of the president's decision. By this afternoon, some Republicans admonished it. Correspondent Mark Irons has more from inside the briefing room. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. At today's White House press briefing, there were a lot of questions about the president's position. In his surprise tweet, he says he came to this decision after consulting with his generals and military experts.
President Trump says on Twitter, "Please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical cost and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. Thank you." Today, newly appointed Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders explains the president's position.
This was a military decision. This was about military readiness. This was about unit cohesion. This was about resources within the military and nothing more.
Family Research Council President Tony Perkins applauds the president for keeping his promise to return to military priorities.
Not only do military leaders think open transgenderism is not good for the military, the vast majority of Americans do not think it is a good idea either.
But others, including Alabama Republican Senator Richard Shelby, says it's just not fair.
Well, I think you ought to treat everybody fairly and you ought to give everybody a chance to serve.
The Catholic Church teaches that those who struggle with their gender should be treated with love and mercy, but everyone, man and woman, should acknowledge and accept his sexual identity. And Pope Francis has addressed the issue, saying gender theory causes confusion, denies reality, and destroys the family.
One study estimates there are around 2,500 transgender service members in active duty out of about 1.3 million troops, but the Pentagon has refused to release any of its own numbers, and they've directed all questions here to the White House. Lauren.
Mark, what is the White House saying about transgender troops currently serving? Are they going to be kicked out?
Well, that is something that is not clear. Sarah Huckabee Sanders says it's an issue that the Department of Defense and the White House will have to look at as lawful implementation of this presidential directive takes place.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thank you, Mark. Senators engage in their first full day of debate over the Obamacare replacement plan. And we've learned the bill could defund more abortion clinics than just Planned Parenthood. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi is tracking the bill's pro-life impact. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. I'm able to confirm tonight that Republicans have tweaked the measure, which would defund Planned Parenthood. It's all in an attempt to help it pass through Senate rules. The change delayed a vote on a bill to do a straight repeal of Obamacare. That bill has just died with a vote of 45 to 55, but Republicans aren't giving up.
It marks an important moment for our country.
The Senate dives into debate on a plan that would repeal Obamacare, giving Congress 2 years to come up with its replacement.
Now we have to keep working hard. We're determined to do everything we can to succeed. We know our constituents are counting on us.
But Democrats say Republicans are going to hurt millions of Americans.
When you find yourself in a hole, the first rule is stop digging. I'd implore my Republican colleagues to stop digging and come work with Democrats.
Republicans tell us they tried.
Obviously, you would like to have a bipartisan approach. But before we even started, The Democrats told us they would not participate. They wouldn't support anything we did.
A vote on the latest measure delayed today by the fight over Planned Parenthood. An earlier draft of the Republican health care plan said abortion providers receiving more than $350 million in Medicaid dollars would lose that funding for 1 year. The Congressional Budget Office found that would only apply to Planned Parenthood, creating a big hurdle with Senate rules. The revision just revealed to me today tries to overcome the obstacle by increasing the number of groups which would be impacted. It now bans abortion providers receiving more than $1 million in Medicaid funds from receiving the money for 1 year.
We have an opportunity to ensure that taxpayer dollars will not contribute to the scourge of abortion under any circumstances.
Senator Luther Strange of Alabama, they're talking about the Hyde Amendment. This is part of all the drafts of the Republican health care plans, and it bans tax credits from going to plans that cover abortion. Lauren?
What are the alternatives that Republicans have?
Well, they're considering what's called a skinny bill. It's really a bare bones approach to this. It would at least get the bill through the Senate so lawmakers in both chambers could then meet to reach a final health care compromise. Senator John Kennedy, who we heard from in that story, tells us he doesn't know what exactly is going to happen. He says we just have to wait and see how the whole amendment process plays out later this week.
Correspondent Jason Calvi at the Capitol. Thank you, Jason. The Republicans have come under fire for their inability to pass health care or a budget, despite controlling Congress and the White House. Joining us now is Genevieve Woods, senior advisor at the Heritage Foundation, who previously worked for the Republican National Committee. Welcome to the program.
Glad I'm at Heritage and not the RNC these
I was
days.
just going to say, boy, would you have your hands full,
yes,
wouldn't
indeed.
you? Let's talk about this. What does all of this mean? We're hearing they're going to have a vote-a-rama, they're voting this, they're voting that. The bottom line, can they pass this?
Well, I think they think that they will eventually get something together that they can get 51 votes for. And what you're going to see between now and basically the next 20 to 24 hours is vote after vote after vote on a number of amendments that may or may not get passed. But at the end of the day, what will happen is Senator Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, will come in and say, here's the final bill. And that will be put together based on how do I get to 51, either 51 senators or 50 senators with Mike Pence coming and giving the final vote.
Let's talk about Planned Parenthood and what we just heard Jason Calvi report exclusively, which is that now to get all of this language through, they are actually doing something that is better for pro-life groups in saying that, all right, there's now $1 million threshold. And instead of a $350 million threshold, and it's not just Planned Parenthood that is going to be axed.
Is it amazing that something better could come out of this than anybody thought? Well, I mean, they are dealing with a lot of rules because they're having to do this on what they call a reconciliation bill, and there's a number of different budget measures in there and language that has to get through the Senate parliamentarian. But at the end of the day, interestingly, I don't think the abortion issue is what's going to hold up this deal at all, because no Democrats are likely going to vote for this. And most Republicans, this isn't what they're concerned about. Many of them, the ones that are concerned, want this kind of language in there. They absolutely know the Republican base, the conservative base, is not going to support something that doesn't include defunding of Planned Parenthood and cutting back on those dollars.
The other big story of today, Genevieve, and help us make some sense out of this, is that there was a tweet today, and the president said he's banning transgender people from the military. They cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption. John McCain then came out, and John McCain said, I don't think so. This is not a good idea. We heard other lawmakers say it. This seems eerily familiar to no gays in the military. This argument, is this going to face the same backlash as that argument?
It's going to probably be similar, but I will tell you, if you talk to not just members of Congress who don't like to fight these messy political battles, but you talk to former generals, including experts at the Heritage Foundation. I talked with one today. He said he thinks this is the right decision in cost because different than gays in the military with transgender, and there's a debate going on in Congress right now about how many taxpayer dollars should go to paying for military health care that pays for all these transgender surgeries. And just as many people don't want to pay for abortions with their tax dollars, many people don't believe they should be having their tax dollars going to pay for transgender surgery. So there is a difference between this and I would argue that the gay debate, but there is also that huge element which is for unit cohesion and the like. They think this is a problem. And while the Pentagon may have said they were surprised this morning, apparently many of the Pentagon chiefs that President Trump talked to
agree with
advised him this direction. So
right.
I find it all interesting how they're all surprised.
Right. I understand exactly what you're saying. Thank you so much for putting this into context. Genevieve Woods of the Heritage Foundation. Positive news tonight for House Majority Whip Steve Scalise. He's being released from the hospital after critically wounded at a shooting at a baseball practice last month. The 6-term Louisiana Republican was discharged yesterday and is now beginning intensive inpatient rehabilitation. The hospital says Scalise is in good spirits and looking forward to returning to work. Scalise and 4 others were injured June 14th when a gunman opened fire at a Republican baseball practice in Alexandria, Virginia. Capitol Police and other officers returned fire and killed the gunman. The U.S. is a step closer to imposing new sanctions against Russia. The House of Representatives overwhelmingly passed the sanction bill yesterday, 419 to 3. The plan includes new sanctions against Iran and North Korea and gives Congress the power to block any effort by the White House to weaken sanctions on Russia. The Senate still needs to approve the plan, and the president has not indicated whether or not he would sign this bill. Some members of Congress from both parties say if the president does decide to veto the bill, there will be sufficient votes to override the veto and enact the bill into law. After the House passed the bill, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani stated that Iran will respond to these sanctions. He didn't say what that means, but added the U.S. hostility would be responded to. A judge in London says critically ill baby Charlie Gard will be transferred to hospice to die unless his family and the hospital treating him agree on an end-of-life plan by noon tomorrow. The announcement comes as the 11-month-old's parents conceded he will not die at home as they had previously wished. Great Ormond Street Hospital said it was not practical to provide the life support treatment at the couple's home. The case caught the attention, worldwide attention, of Donald Trump and Pope Francis, and the cause garnered widespread grassroots support. Hundreds of Hamas national security forces marched through Gaza City to protest Israel's installation of new security measures at the Temple Mount Shrine in Jerusalem. A senior Muslim official says worshipers would not return to the shrine until Israel removed cameras it installed after a deadly attack. Under intense pressure, the metal detectors were removed earlier this week. A device exploded yesterday at the headquarters of Mexico's Catholic Council of Bishops. No one was injured, but video of the blast shows it blowing open the door. The Bishops' Council said the homemade device was left outside the building in Mexico City in the middle of the night. Now, police are trying to find possible suspects or motives. Cardinal George Pell, a top financial advisor to the Holy Father, appears in Australia in a court to face sex abuse charges. Cardinal Pell did not say anything outside court, surrounded by police and journalists. The 76-year-old says he's innocent, and his lawyer told the judge today he will plead not guilty. The Vatican has expressed support for Pell, and His Eminence says he intends to continue his work as the Vatican's finance czar once the case is resolved. Alan Holdren is the EWTN Rome Bureau Chief. Alan, what happened in court today?
Well, it's just a very quick briefing, a hearing, Lauren, that only lasted 6 minutes to decide how this legal process will move forward. What they decided in court was that the lawyers will convene to discuss the evidence in September, and then on October the 6th, Cardinal Pell will appear in court again, and they'll hear whether or not this case will go to trial. This is a case where, from the very beginning, Cardinal Pell has said that he is innocent. His lawyers said today that they will plead not guilty on his behalf.
Can you tell us what the reaction is in Australia?
There were a lot of people gathered outside of the court today, some in favor supporting Cardinal Pell, saying, "We love you, we support you." Others who were just asking for justice, for the truth to come out. Cardinal Pell said himself before leaving that he just wants to be there in order that the truth does come out and to clear his name, he said.
The church in Australia has really suffered a great deal from the sex abuse scandal. Tell us what it's doing to just fight this.
Sadly, Lauren, there have been more than 4,000 accusations of sex abuse cases against minors by priests in the last 35 years. The dioceses across Australia have implemented very good measures. I spoke with someone from the Vatican's Commission for Child Protection today that confirmed this fact. He said that they've been doing a very good job in the last several years to implement zero tolerance policies across the diocese and the Catholic Church in all of Australia. And this is something that's gathering steam, and he said that people are looking to the Catholic Church in some circumstances as a point of reference so that this might spill out into the rest of society.
Alan Holdren, EWTN Rome Bureau Chief, thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, the former drug czar joins me to discuss the opioid crisis. Lawmakers in Missouri delivered the state's pro-life governor a political win by sending him a wide-ranging bill tightening abortion regulations. The bill limits who can provide information about abortions to women and would also require clinics get approval from the health department before providing abortion-inducing drugs. The bill's passage comes after the first-year governor called lawmakers back to the Capitol for a special summer session focused on pro-life policy. The Archbishop of St. Louis says this important pro-life legislation will save the lives of unborn children, safeguard the health and safety of women, and protect the freedom of pregnancy resource centers to hire whom they choose. A national Catholic group is speaking out after the use of the death penalty in Ohio for the first time in 3.5 years. Ronald Phillips was put to death this morning for the 1993 rape and slaying of his girlfriend's 3-year-old daughter. The Catholic Mobilizing Network says it's saddened the state has resumed executions. The group added today's execution exemplifies the brokenness of the death penalty in this country. Ohio has allowed the need for vengeance to supersede the sanctity and dignity of all life. The opioid crisis has been called the worst health crisis in American history. More Americans die due to drugs than car accidents. And this crisis affects everyone, rich and poor, in rural and urban areas. I recently sat down with one leader who has been fighting the war on drugs for almost 30 years. Joining me now is Bill Bennett, the first director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Welcome to the program.
Drug czar, as we used to say.
That's my line. I was going to say you were known as the drug czar.
Sorry, it's my only laugh line.
The statistics around opioid-related drug overdoses are just staggering. 91 people die of an opioid-related overdose every single day in this country. Put this in historical perspective for us, please.
As my friend John Walters, who succeeded me as drug czar, wrote the other day, drug trafficking in America right now may be the largest criminal enterprise in American history. The amount of drugs brought into this country and sold to people illegally, which causes death and despair and the abandonment of children, is the worst it's ever been. I was there during the crack epidemic. That's sort of why they created my office. Joe Biden and others in the Senate created my office, and it was a very serious thing, very awful epidemic, and we were on the cover of all the magazines and newspapers with crack.
But
this
today,
is much worse. It's much bigger. It goes to more parts of the country. The crack thing tended to be isolated and devastating in inner cities. This thing is all over the place. Interestingly,
rural,
probably more rural than anywhere else, but it's making headway everywhere. The problem is, Lauren, I think we are going about it the wrong way.
Tell me about that. You say, this was shocking to me when I read this, that the real problem isn't the overprescribing of opioids by doctors and hospitals, medical professionals, but it's the illegal opioids like heroin and fentanyl.
Let me be very careful here. This is a problem, the overprescribing. It is still a problem. And the problem may have started, at least in terms of historically, may have started with more overprescription causing problems than anything else. And we still have pill mills, and we still have some doctors who are prescribing too many. But not my theory. The facts are the facts. And the facts are now those numbers are going down. Some states have regulated. There's been some other regulation in the industry, in the medical industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, so that there are fewer pills going out to people who, A, who need them, and B, that will be abused. Nevertheless, the deaths keep going up. And why do the deaths keep going up? Because of things like heroin, $2 a hit in many places, $2. And fentanyl,
and readily available,
and readily available, pouring in from Mexico and probably going to make its way in from China as well.
So the Senate health care bill includes $45 billion over 10 years to fight this epidemic. Is that the right place to be spending the money? Is it going to make a difference?
There will be some state discretion on this money, which is good. And I think we should give people in the states their head on this. Let them think what they do is best. Let them do what they think is best. But unless we get on the supply side, what used to be called the supply side, the interdiction side, the use of real intelligence, unless we tell the Chinese we are not going to tolerate sending these things in anymore.
Not the Mexicans?
And the Mexicans as well, absolutely. I'm just worried about the looming China problem, which could dwarf the Mexico problem. So these are matters of international relations. The State Department has to be involved as well. The other thing is, and again, I know conventional wisdom, I have been to all the major treatment centers. It is fine to give people support for treatment and to help rehabilitate them, but the success rates are small. It's a small percentage.
20%?
15, 20, 25% of people are level with you. Obviously, the best thing to do is to keep people from ever getting on in the first place. Figure of speech I use, a lot of people don't like it. So if you have beachfront property and people are swimming and they're losing limbs to sharks, you can open up prosthetic limb stores on the beach, but get the sharks out of the
infested water.
Yeah.
Is a border wall going to stop trafficking?
It can help, but it's only one step. There's a lot more we need to do.
The Justice Department announced a nationwide crackdown. They arrested 400 people for healthcare fraud and opioid scams, totaling $1.3 billion. How important is that approach?
That's good. There are some successes. People can take a look at Southern Indiana in 2014. Coordinated efforts, law enforcement, the treatment community, the prevention community, the schools, the churches, adults, parents. You remember there was attention paid to the drug problem in the late 80s, and things got better. People don't know this either. In 1979, we had maybe 25% of people using illegal drugs. Those numbers dropped in half by 1992. The country paid attention. We pushed back. Remember the ads? This is your brain on drugs.
Drugs with the fried egg.
Right.
Yes,
you got to push back just as hard on this.
And Nancy Reagan saying, say no to drugs.
Yeah, you know, the intellectuals made fun of it, but parents thought it made sense, and kids thought it made sense.
And it worked. All right.
It was simple for them to remember. No.
Thank you so much, Bill Bennett. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Tune in tomorrow for more of my interview with Bill Bennett. We discuss the role the church can play in combating this epidemic. Up next, honoring Father Hamel on the one-year anniversary of his tragic death. Today, the church honors the parents of the Blessed Virgin Mary. St. Anne and St. Joachim are the patron saint of grandparents, since they are the grandparents of Jesus. Today marks the one-year anniversary of the death of Father Jacques Hamel, the elderly priest killed by terrorists in France. Si le Père vous appelle. French President Emmanuel Macron delivered an impassioned speech after a Mass on the anniversary. Father Hamel was celebrating Mass for 3 nuns and 2 parishioners on a quiet summer morning when the attackers burst in and killed the 85-year-old priest. ISIS claimed responsibility. Finally tonight, can Catholics get tattoos? Our partners at Catholic News Agency looked into it, and there is no biblical or official ban on Catholics from getting tattoos, in case you were wondering. In fact, it's a practice that dates back centuries. One of the most common claims against the use of tattoos, however, is a verse in Leviticus, which says, "Do not lacerate your bodies for the dead, and do not tattoo yourselves, I am the Lord." However, the Catholic Church has always distinguished between moral and Mosaic law in the Old Testament, and that rule from Leviticus falls under Mosaic law, and that deals with Jewish rituals. Read more on the topic, head to CatholicNewsAgency.com. All of that said, my mama would be very disappointed if I ever came home with a tattoo, even if it was a cross. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Don't forget, follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I'll see you again tomorrow. Good night, and God bless you.